Your Hormonal Story, a podcast about real women and real stories, breaking down the stigma about hormonal conditions. Join us for an informal chat about women's health, the struggles, the solutions. I'm Jeff Butterworth, naturopath and women's health specialist for over 25 years. Everyone has a story, and we'd love to help you with your unique story. This week on Your Hormonal Story, we chat to a fabulous woman called Kim, who's 52 years old, and we chat to her about her experiences with endometriosis. And we dig right into a time of her life when she was trying to conceive for her second child after the birth of her daughter, and she had 3 miscarriages. So we talk about how that made her feel, her relationship with a partner, and how they coped with this difficult time of life. So if you've ever had a miscarriage, it's a really interesting listen. And then we get into her experiences with perimenopause and menopause and how she's successfully navigated this time of life. So if you suffer from endometriosis, ever had a miscarriage in that time of life of perimenopause and menopause, then this episode is a must watch. So enjoy the conversation. Welcome to Your Hormonal Story. So this week we've got a really fantastic story about a real woman that's sitting right next to me here, Kim, and she's going to tell us all about her journey with fertility, with endometriosis, and we're going to touch on something that we often don't talk about is her partner and his journey along the way, because it's often an untold story. So welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
It's such an important thing, and we were just chatting before offline about how women's stories aren't being told, and this is why we're doing these podcasts, so we can get real women like you share your story, and hopefully, as we said, if it just helps one lady, then we've done our job, but hopefully we can help thousands as well. So I always like to start with some form of diagnosis. Now, I know for you, your diagnosis of endometriosis was very late in the picture, which is very common. And unfortunately, women have to go through years and years and years of suffering without knowing what's going on. So just tell me a little bit about your diagnosis, and then we'll head both ways in your particular story.
Okay, so yes, Jeff, I was around 38 when I first found out that that's what I had, and it actually come about after the birth of our daughter, and then we were trying to conceive and kept miscarriage, had 3 miscarriages, and started asking questions, thinking there's something wrong with us. And as you do, you're not informed with all these sorts of things at different times. So then ended up going to see one gynecologist who wanted to use a different type of birth control, and I was thinking and trying to regulate periods, and she just seemed to be so off track as to what getting to the cause of the problem. So I just left there feeling a bit very confused, and then started looking into other options myself, and found a really amazing gynecologist who was referred to us from the obstetrician that delivered our baby. And going to him, it just changed my life, because he was really caring, and he asked what had been happening. And then after about half an hour, he said, Kim, you have this, and this, and we can do this, and this. And he said basically that our daughter was a miracle, because my endometriosis, in his opinion, was so bad. So he said for us to even have a child was remarkable. And yeah, so it really started there. And I don't know if I'd even heard of endometriosis at that time. Just, my periods were actually regular usually, and just a lot of bloating, and thinking, oh, well, and unless you talk to people, you just think that everyone goes through the same journey. So it started way late into my life when I found out.
Okay, it's really interesting. We hear this a lot and we know this a lot, that you've got to go to so many doctors to get a diagnosis. And, there's so many doctors out there, but we hear this, I finally found this one amazing doctor. And it just surprises me that there are so few doctors that can look at the symptoms of endometriosis or whether it's PCOS and diagnose it, because they're not difficult symptoms to diagnose, but then obviously they're invasive. Did you actually get any sort of further testing to confirm the diagnosis?
After I'm not sure if it was a first or second miscarriage, because the first miscarriage, they encourage us to let the body do its natural thing. And I, same thing, wasn't informed, didn't know. Okay, I'll listen to the experts. And then just kept going back and saying, something's not right. And I'm feeling, bloated, uncomfortable. My gut feeling was there was something wrong. And the doctors just were sitting saying, well, you're not still pregnant. And I was like, yeah, I know, because we had a scan and they said the fetus had died at around 14 weeks. And then unfortunately, a few weeks later, standing at work and just hemorrhaged and was rushed off to the hospital, and then ended up getting a curette done at that time. Then they found some cysts on my ovaries and sort of looked into things a little bit more after that. And then that was noted on my file. And then I had another miscarriage after that. See, the thing for me, which was unusual, they couldn't work out, I seemed to just basically look at my husband, I could get pregnant. Whereas for a lot of people that have endometriosis, they struggle to conceive, but that wasn't a problem for us. So maybe that was part of the dismissing, because we didn't fit into that square box category. So then the next time I just demanded straight in, fetus has died. I just want it dealt with and move on. And then they were looking into things a bit more. And I think with noting on file and the GP, and when I finally ended up at that amazing gynecologist, he just hit it straight away. He's just onto it.
Okay. And just tell me a little bit about the miscarriages, because this is something that's really not talked about in terms of the emotional roller coaster that you go through, the physical symptoms. And one miscarriage is too many, but 3 is really takes its toll on you personally, the relationship. Tell me about that experience.
It was really stressful, and I wish there was some sort of support program back then, Jeff, that you could go to and speak to people that, like the gynecologist, well, this was a previous one during that time because I swapped over, and he said, look, Kim, basically, or he said to both of us, basically sometimes when the sperm meets the egg, it's not compatible, and these things happen. They were like really high stats, which surprised me. And then, look, it was a tough time. In the end too, we ended up focusing on what we didn't have and what we wanted. So we had a really healthy, beautiful baby, and then we wanted we wanted 4 kids originally. We ended up with 1. So we are blessed because she's very healthy, and she was, but we were focusing on what we didn't have. So the strain on our relationship and marriage was really quite significant. And I think it was about us communicating and working, okay, well, we've got 1 healthy child. If we get another one, it's a bonus. But then all the hormonal changes and the roller coaster ride of, not feeling like there was support available where you could speak to people. And back then thinking, like, I'm 52, so I was in my early 30s. It wasn't really something people talked about until much later on. I sort of felt that people said, we don't talk about those sorts of things.
Yeah, and we still don't. And this is, when you think about it, no one tells anyone about whether they're pregnant or not until 12 weeks because of the risk of miscarriage. But why not? And no one talks about miscarriage, and it's such a traumatic event. Anyone that's experienced miscarriage, and well, as you mentioned, you've got the hormones going everywhere, so you're feeling out of balance, but it's essentially the loss of a child, and there is no counselling. No one's talking about it. As a couple, you're left to wonder, and one of the hardest things is, will it ever be? So it's such a difficult time of life.
It was definitely a really, really hard time in our marriage. So it took a while, because also you have this sense of blame. So when the first miscarriage happened, I thought, oh, because I'm really into exercise and keeping fit and healthy. And I thought, oh, well, I won't exercise next time. You know, I must have overdone it. I've done something wrong. And then so you change everything and it happens again and you think, what's wrong with me? And then you start blaming you because you're carrying this child. But at no time ever once did my husband blame, or there was if anything, he was just trying to be more supportive because he could see that it was a really stressful time.
And you go through one miscarriage and then it's not like something that you can avoid because you want to have more children. So you've then got to back up emotionally, and you can't just, well, you shouldn't really just try for another child straight away. So you've got to let your body rest and heal for at least 3 months and then get yourself ready. And then you try again. And then the stress of wondering, will you have another miscarriage? And then if you do have another miscarriage, it's like going into a boxing match, a fight that you don't want to go into. It's such a difficult thing.
Oh, you are so correct, Jeff. And there's no one, it feels like you're just alone on the journey. There's no one there and you know, your GP only does so much, but there needs to be more like a support network or something set up, because I remember at one stage after the second one, I'd gone around to my nan's to pick up our daughter, and my nan, God love her, she's had so much wisdom. And I remember just crying, and she said, oh, I put her arm around me. She said, you know, I had one too. And like I was in my, you know, middle 30s by then, and no one had ever discussed it in the family, but, you know, finally saying, okay, I know how it feels. I think that's the whole thing too. You want to feel like someone understands what that feels like.
Yeah. And the only way we can do that is having these conversations and saying it's okay. You know, you haven't done anything wrong, and it is a part of life, unfortunately. And let's put some counselling service available. Let's, you know, make a plan for how you can prepare yourself potentially for the next child. And there's certain things as well, and I don't think a lot of doctors realise this, is a lot of miscarriages is through low progesterone levels in that first 12 weeks. So ensuring that there's sufficient progesterone, and one of the only times I recommend progesterone is in that first 12 weeks. But surprisingly, a lot of GPs don't even know that, and they accept miscarriage as part of life and just get on with it. But as we talked about, it's such a traumatic event, and if you can prevent one miscarriage, then that's a fantastic thing. And the more you prep your body with getting those hormones balanced, as you've learned since, it can help prevent those miscarriages as well.
And you just said before, you need to give your body 3 months rest. No one tells you that you need to do that. Like, you just think, okay. So, and the GPs, I'll just go and get pregnant, you know, like, and what you're saying makes sense. The body's not ready. It's just tried to deal with that one, and now you want to throw it into something else. So I understand now, as I've got older, about the roller coaster ride of the hormones, and if it doesn't repair and heal, then how can it go on to the next phase?
Yeah, might be a good time to bring in your husband at this point, and we don't want to make it about him, of course, but he's part of the story. But you know, this is for men equally. It's a very emotional situation, obviously not physically. Tell me about his experiences, his words, how he coped with that, and how as a couple you got through that.
Oh, he was very supportive. He's such a calm and caring natured person, and I find myself, I can get, you know, more anxious and stressed about things. Not so much now, but definitely years ago. And he's very good at communicating. And so we ended up going to counselling, and that was really powerful and really constructive, because you could work out then, just to work through the process, how each of us were feeling, and men and women feel differently. They have, you know, they communicate differently, they'll feel differently. So it was good to go to that and just talk it through with a mutual person, and then give some tools and strategies around going forward. And the main thing I focus on, well, we have a healthy child. Yes, we'd like another one, but don't lose sight of what you already have. And having a child is a very special gift. And I'd experienced that once. So, but look, there's not a day goes past. I actually haven't asked him, but there's not a day goes past where I don't think of the what if or another child, because when you really want something and it feels like it's unachievable. I think you learn to manage your life and just have a different mindset. But yeah, I do think of it often.
And that's a classic sign of a deep trauma, in terms of even post-traumatic stress syndrome. There's these hurts sit deep in your psyche for many, many years, as you said. So it certainly can't be understated, the extent of what's happened in your life.
No, and reading your emails that come through and now watching the podcast that you're doing, I've looked and thought, oh my goodness, you shouldn't look in the rear vision mirror, but thinking, my goodness, I bet there would have been something that could have worked for us, but we missed that, didn't have that chance because there wasn't the education and there wasn't someone around like yourselves that could help inform people like us. So, yeah.
Tell me, you mentioned that with part of the counselling that, men deal with things differently and women deal with things differently. Tell me about that a little bit, about how you dealt with it and how your partner dealt with it that was different.
I think by having an independent person there that can actually bring everything out in a very comfortable communication setting. So then for me, be able to saying that I was feeling guilty, that I wasn't being a good wife in that sense, that I couldn't then produce another child, in a sense of having that sense of feeling of guilt, and that, that it was all my fault. But then also he could talk about how he was feeling as well. So he was feeling similar to me because he wanted another child desperately as well. So it was good to sit there and understand and have an open communication around how we each other felt. And then I think going away and then being able to talk about it together, and then really focusing on, okay, we have a healthy child, and maybe the universe doesn't want us to have my husband's a teacher now and he gets to work with kids all day. So I sort of laughed that off in a sense that, some of his dream was fulfilled. So that was really important. I know people consider counselling as a sign of weakness, but now as I've got older, and much older now, even in the last 10 years, it's a real sign of strength. And society should be, openly more saying, because that's what professional experts are. When you can't deal with something yourself, there's always someone else that can help you. And asking for help, I think, is really good.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
More people should do it.
And counselling, it's a tool that you have in a toolbox to get over these things. And if you, for example, didn't do that counselling, didn't talk about it, didn't have a supportive partner, that trauma and hurt sits deeper, and that will eventually come out somewhere and can affect your health in many different ways. So trying to release this, rationalize it, and reconcile it and let it be in the past is a really, really important thing for any women listening that have had miscarriages or in the same situation that you were. It's really important that you use as many tools as you can to cope, because it's such a stressful situation.
And I know people don't mean it at times, but you've been married for a while and people will be saying, oh, come on, when you're having kids, it's like this expectation. And then you have one, it's, oh, come on, they need a playmate, brother or sister or something. Or you get the other things like, oh, you're so lucky you've only got one. People really need to be careful about, I stayed silent for so long and thought, if you only knew what we've been through, and yes, we only have one, but you sort of, I think society unfortunately promotes that there's this, perfect scenario, and it's not like that for everyone. I mean, now that as I've got older and you talk to more people, the amount of people that have had miscarriage, whether they had one or two, or I know someone that had 8 before they had one child. So when I was told that story, it really helped me put things in perspective, Jeff, that we didn't miss a beat. I got pregnant really easily and had a lot of morning sickness to about 15 weeks. But apart from that, I had a really good pregnancy and feel very grateful for that. But then to talk to someone that had 8 and never had any kids, I don't know how they got out of bed in the morning, seriously, So it does, there's always someone better off and worse off. And I think the talking really helps to understand, have some empathy around what people are going through.
And I think if we did talk more about miscarriages, for example, and hormonal issues in general, those faux pas about asking about when you're having another child wouldn't happen, because it would be common knowledge that we've had some miscarriages, so we're not going to go there and discuss, bring up those issues kind of thing. So the other thing I'd like to touch on as well is, and you just did, is, so many women are going through so much with their hormones and different hormonal conditions, and it's significant, whether it's endometriosis or PCOS or chronic dysmenorrhea or whatever it is. And it's really a heavy burden to carry through life. And if it's not talked about, then women are feeling like it's them. They're feeling very alone and isolated. How did you feel around that, in terms of, obviously you had your husband to talk to, but when all this was going on, were you feeling alone?
Initially, but I think once there was this whole sense of absolute relief when the gynecologist said, Kim, I believe, in my best knowledge from all my years' experience, that you have this, this and this, and we can do this, this and this. It felt like this big weight was lifted off me, because I felt like I was alone at that point. And a couple of times going to the doctor and she'd say, well, you're not still pregnant, and these sort of off the cuff comments, you're starting to think that then maybe there is really something wrong with me. So that felt great, I must say, even though the news to say, well, that you have, your child is most likely a miracle, and that you might not have any more, that wasn't great. But I think when you have time to process it and look at the big picture of it, then I think that's when you can, as a person, say, okay, yeah, well, this is not great, but there's some positives and negatives here to look at. You finally get a diagnosis. So, yeah. And then speaking, my parents are wonderful. I still have my parents. I'm so grateful for that. And my mum and I have a close relationship, and we talk openly, but more so, I think, as I've got older, because different generations, like having our daughter, seems like now there's no conversation that's off limits. And so different generations gone by can communicate differently. But yeah, I just think we're in a blessed world in a sense now. I know there's a lot of things going on around there, but communication and education and helping others guide them, they find their way. I think that's really fantastic if you can give that opportunity.
And you mentioned there that you felt like, and one of the doctors, sort of, when you don't get that diagnosis and they're saying everything's fine, is you feel like it's just you, and you start to question yourself. Is this just me? Am I crazy? Because you're going to these doctors that have studied for all this time and no one can tell you what's wrong. And a few of our other podcasts, it's a similar theme that comes through, is these women have got, and you had, significant symptoms that are occurring, and it's, well, there's nothing wrong with you because we can't test for it. So it's incredible in this day and age that it's basically borderline thinking, is this all in my head? But you've got these significant physical symptoms.
Yes. So yeah, I know it's tough now that I'm out the other side and through it. Like I remember seeing Lisa Curry at a conference one time. She was talking, that's how I was first introduced to happy hormones, and her speaking about things. I thought, wow, I need that product. And I thought that's a real turning point. But if you're not educated or aware, and we don't have these conversations, how can our next generations, like I said, like our daughter, understand what's going on? And I'm very in tune with my body, always have been. So I just felt that there was something not right. And then now I'm very open to non-conventional medicine. If something's wrong, I would definitely first go to a naturopath or I know we need our GPs and experts around us, but I'd go off there now before sort of going down the other path, just from my experience.
The best way is this integrative approach. Obviously, GPs, doctors have fabulous diagnostic methods, although obviously there's big holes in that system as well. But obviously naturopaths and holistic practitioners come at it from a different perspective, more from a preventative perspective, a holistic perspective, and they're bringing different tools to the table. And if you've got a good team around you, that's when you can really manage, particularly things like endometriosis. No one system is going to be able to, it certainly won't cure it, but manage it on its own. So you need these different mechanisms and tools to cope. So let's actually go right back to when you first got your period. I want to understand a little bit about your progression of the endometriosis, because there's probably some things, and you mentioned that you're quite fit and active. There's probably some things that you were doing without knowing that were improving your endometriosis symptoms. So you weren't at that really chronic level that might have caused you to get diagnosed earlier. So tell me, when you first started getting your period, what you were experiencing and how you felt at that time.
So I think I was in year 7, but I was about 11 or 12. And when I got it, I just thought, well, and it was very regular each month. That was one thing as well, that it was a consistent pattern there. So when I've talked to other friends with endo, theirs not as regular. So a lot of bloating when, for the 2 or 3 days. And not every month there was pain, but some months more significant. But like I said, exercise. So I was running and played netball and kept really active. So I find too, I must have a good pain threshold, because unless something's really, really hurting, it takes a lot to stop me, even now as I've got older. So yeah, it just seemed more so, I found for me, a lot of bloating for that time. Even you knew when it was coming, and because I just felt really uncomfortable.
Okay. And we're going, obviously, back about 40 odd years now, what was just it's a fair, but back then, for certainly, that was definitely not a known condition very well, endometriosis. But tell me a bit, you're saying you're very active, but how would you describe your diet and back then in terms of the family? Was there any focus on health in the household? Were you a sugar eater? Can you remember what sort of diet you were raised on?
We ate really well, and probably, if anything, a little bit of sugar here and there. I wouldn't say an excessive amount. Probably a traditional meat and vegetable sort of type diet, potatoes and meat and veggies and things, healthy. Not a lot of soft drinks and things like that. Bit of cordial in there. Yeah, looking back from knowing what I hear more about hormones and that sort of thing, that's can play a big part. And I was always got a lot of sleep, big sleeper, loved my sleep. So in terms of eating, I don't know, I wouldn't say I was high in any particular area than one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, because I said you've had the bloating. Typical endometriosis will have significant pain levels to the point where you're having to be on painkillers. Were you taking any painkillers different times in your cycle?
No, not when I was younger. So I was just trying to think back. Isn't it hard when you think so many years ago and then just reliving and remembering? I suppose because then you thought, okay, this is normal. Probably, if anything, back then we did eat a lot of bread. Bread was a common part of our diet, whereas now I try everything I do not to eat much bread and things like that. I try and go with like real food in a sense and stay away from sugar where possible. So it would have been more into my probably early 20s and a bit later, I suppose. Then you started drinking alcohol and partying and not living that good, maybe going out more. So I noticed a change there, Jeff. But I suppose that's part of living. But now with the education I have around that, there's things I could have done to help that too. But didn't know, just thought, oh, well, everyone's got the same.
So did you notice a worsening of your symptoms when you were drinking more alcohol then, when you were younger?
Yes. And not that I wouldn't say like I was drinking every day. Probably back then in your younger years, you generally partied on the weekends. So yeah, not eating well, fast food. Yeah, I noticed more of a difference then.
Okay. And you mentioned you were really active when you're in teens, but have you always been active? What's been your sport or activity that you've always done?
Running, netball, and more so now as getting older with injuries, things, cycling, swimming, cardio workouts. So probably when I was talking in my early 20s, I'd say I was, less on the active side because I got well into my career then and I was going really well. And I think I started, now that I'm listening, remembering things, I was exercising less and eating and drinking more of the wrong foods that would have been heightening the hormones and causing extra discomfort for me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to put it, because everyone has their own different story, and just for you putting on, because your symptoms don't seem to be as severe with endometriosis as some of the other women that can have really severe symptoms, is what are the things that you were doing to manage your endometriosis? And it's something that we always suggest is obviously eating a good diet, avoiding alcohol, and for endometriosis, exercise seems to be a real key ingredient in managing the condition. And you've always kept yourself active, so that's, I'd say, played a large role in not allowing that endometriosis to get out of control.
I know reading the emails through that come through every week and it actually encourages you to exercise. It's actually good, even with getting your period. I say to our daughter, a bit of exercise, even if you don't feel like doing it, walking, even if you do 30 minutes. And I was interested when I was reading that, so I thought I'd say over the years that me keeping active would have helped for sure.
No, it certainly does. So how old is your daughter now?
She'll be 21 in July.
Okay. And is she showing any signs of endometriosis or similar?
No, nothing yet, but I was wondering if there's a test that she can have to see, if she actually has it, but she hasn't said that she's in, horrendous pain. She has at times when she was doing, like, say, she's at uni now, but year 11 and 12, when maybe she was a little more stressed with exams, she said more pain, so she was taking, I think, just some ibuprofens. And there's another tablet that I can't think of the name of it now, that you can get from the pharmacist that helps with pain management during that time.
There's often a very familial history with endometriosis, so it's something to certainly keep an eye on. And one of our passions is teaching younger women how to manage their hormones naturally and understand that their diet, lifestyle, exercise play a huge role in how their periods, the pain levels, how heavy their periods are and that kind of thing. So I'm sure you've probably been keenly watching, if she's had any of these symptoms. So it sounds like she's okay, but certainly worth keeping an eye on.
And we do talk openly about it. I've explained to her, she knows that we had, because for years she'd say, oh, how come an only child, kids at school must say things, and we'd say to her that she was so perfect, she broke the mold and there was no more. But then as she got older, we actually told her we've explained to her about the miscarriages, and I've talked to her about endo and, just saying things to look out for, because I'd never want anyone else to have that pain when you have a focus and you want to have a certain amount of kids and then it doesn't happen for you. So just, education around that and nurturing her through that journey as well. And then when she comes to that time. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, Okay, good. So let's go right to the present now, and you've had some experience with our approach and products. Tell me now, you must be coming close, or you're getting into this, certainly perimenopausal, but into a menopausal stage of life. Tell me how your periods are now, and if you're suffering from any symptoms.
So at about, same when I saw that gynecologist, about 38, I'd wake up feeling quite wet and clammy. So it started really early for me, and I know we shouldn't get on to Mr. and Mrs. Google and start researching, but we do tend to do a bit of self-diagnosis. So when I started taking happy hormones, I noticed that was the one thing that changed significantly, really quickly, as I wasn't waking up feeling like someone had tipped a bucket of water over me. And also I found, and look, I know stress can escalate things too, but I felt better in myself and not sort of a bit niggly. And even my husband sometimes will say, "Are you still taking those happy hormones?" So we have little jokes about it. But yeah, it definitely helped. I was very surprised how much it helped. But then you need it. I feel like it's a bit of a team. You need to do the other things as well. So yes, you need to eat things and stress. I didn't realise until started reading your emails and then seeing the podcast how much stress can escalate our hormones. And at times it can be hard to keep a lid on that. So certain things can only do so much. We as humans, we need to make changes as well and reduce alcohol intake. So that's why the emails coming through and everything, if you're reading them, you say, "Oh, okay, I didn't realise that." Not that I think I was a big drinker, but you can go through phases where, 1 or 2 wines with dinner every night can be quite soothing, but it then can have the reverse effect where it could be affecting everything else in your body. So yes, just being more vigilant around those things has definitely helped me. And now I actually had a stage not long ago, last year, I didn't have a period for 6 months, and they thought, okay, it's all finished. And then I did get another one, but they're very few and far between now, and a day or, not even. So I'd say I'm well and truly at the other side.
And how long have you been taking happy hormones for?
I was actually, before I started chatting with you today, it has to be about 8 years, I think.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm just phasing things out now, coming through to, I don't know how much longer I'll be in this zone.
Well, there's a couple of really good lessons in there for other ladies listening. One is, as you mentioned, it's a system. So happy hormones is just a tool. It's certainly not a cure-all, but it's a tool that you can use in this stage of life to help you navigate from and allow your body to do what it should be doing naturally. And I'll go into this a little bit. There's a misconception that you need estrogen levels and progesterone levels during menopause, and there's kind of this HRT myth that you need these hormones to age well and to be healthy. And it's almost like menopause is a disease, but this is actually what your body wants to do. It actually doesn't want estrogen and progesterone when you're going into menopause because you're not fertile anymore. So what your body does is it shifts to this alternate hormone system using more androgen-based hormones, so male hormones. But in women, they have the same effect. Things like ADL and DHEA, they have the same effect as estrogen and progesterone, but without, I call them side effects, is probably not the right word, of estrogen and progesterone when you're not fertile, because both those hormones are quite stimulatory. So what you've done by being on happy hormones all that time without realizing, if you've supported your natural process, you've allowed your body to go through that. So you've only had minimal sort of hot flushes, and your periods become less and less, and you've sort of slid through that really well. And considering your history with endometriosis, that's really, really amazing. Whereas we get a lot of ladies turn up with full-blown hot flushes, 25 a day, and they're expecting results in a few weeks. So it's really important to, particularly in the perimenopausal phase, early 40s, to start to support your body through that transitionary period. And happy hormones is a tool, but diet and lifestyle, that cause and effect, and reducing alcohol, not equally, a lot more important. And then happy hormones is just that tool that brings it all together. So just to shape any of the ladies that are wondering, well, why has Kim gone through this and had a really nice journey? It's a combination of that. You're doing the right things with your diet and lifestyle, and understanding that particularly alcohol, because what alcohol does is it stops the detoxification of your own hormones internally. So drinking alcohol will increase your circulating estrogens by about 200% for between 4 to 6 hours, because instantly it sees alcohol as a toxin, and it will metabolize the alcohol first, then it'll go back to what it should be doing, which is metabolizing hormones, or one of the liver's jobs. So, this is, a lot of women really literally cry into their wine glass, because that's been their coping mechanism with kids and everything else, is have a glass of wine, you can switch off. But, the secondary side effects of that for women particularly, unfortunately, can be quite severe. And it's just one of the things we suggest when it comes to hot flushes. Alcohol, sugar, stress, and coffee are the 4 big things that'll make hot flushes worse. So, but you've done really, really well. So congratulations.
Well, I've had the support, because in the early day, you were still saying, I don't think the emails were always weekly. They might have been, but just reading that, I know we get a lot of emails when we've signed up for different groups, but if you read, particular ones and get educated on, then you can help. And it's got to start here with yourself. And I've talked to other girlfriend just recently. I said, but if you do this, this, and this, who actually has taken this, and this, then it'll all work together as part of a team of help nurturing your body. And then a couple of times visiting GP saying, recommending HRT. I said, no, I don't need that. I was adamant that I didn't want to go down that path, because I have a lot of older friends, and the issues they had, some of them, many different things. And I just thought, if I look for a more natural style, then that's going to nurture my body for longevity rather than too many chemicals.
Sure, our bodies are not diseased when it comes to hormones. They can get out of balance, but it's, the natural process that the body goes through it's really amazing, to be honest. But we've put this sort of disease label on menopause and touting HRT, but it's really just putting a band-aid on what the body wants to do, and that can cause a whole lot of problems down the line. So are you a member of our communities as well, the Facebook groups?
Actually, I don't know if I am following the group on Facebook. I'll have to check.
Yeah, because you mentioned the emails as the way that you were educated. So we've got lots of different ways that we help ladies, and the online Facebook group, there's about 178,000 women in there now. That's another way that women consume their content and the education that we're giving them. So it can get quite full on, because there's, we're getting hundreds of post requests a day from ladies. So we only allow about 20. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, it might be something you can have a look at. But and we're now with the podcast, we're putting a lot of content onto YouTube as well. So just trying to touch people in different ways where they consume media. So if you're enjoying the emails, then that's fine.
Well, it's definitely created awareness, and I've told numerous about friends that are, a bit older or coming through, saying, you got to try it, at least give it a go, because if what you're doing is not working, then you need to make a change.
Yeah. And we tend to say is, start with the natural process first. And in our experience, about 90% of women we can help in a significant way. But obviously you can't cure everyone or help everyone. So if women are not willing to make those other dietary and lifestyle changes, it can make it difficult as well. So we have a solution for a group of the community, and if you follow what we do, you can see the results you get. So, and you're a great example of that. So thank you so much for spending the time today, Kim. It's been a real pleasure listening to your story and listening to all the hardship, but it's really nice to see how you've dealt with that and you've come through, and now you're enjoying your wonderful daughter who's developing her own life now as well. So thank you so much for spending that time, and hopefully lots of women can watch this and take joy and education and learning from your story.
Thank you. Fabulous in your 50s. It's achievable, and you can cruise through your 40s, but you have to make changes. Exactly.
And it's better to make it in your 40s. You make those changes then so that you can enjoy your 50s. Otherwise, the 50s can be a rough ride for many women, as we see. So,
a roller coaster ride of hormones.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Too.